Hello, and welcome to this week's Bible study. As always, I like to start with 3 deep breathing exercises, so if you wouldn't mind doing that with me right now. So deep breath in, deep breath out, deep breath in, deep breath out. Fantastic. So after the deep breathing, I like to play a quiet worship song. I can't play it here for copyright reasons, but if you go, for those watching on YouTube, you can go into the link in the description, and there should be a link for quiet worship, but for those watching on Facebook, you can just scroll down and it should be right there. But those on YouTube, you can click on the link in the description that says quiet worship. It should be the first one, and you can play that, and then you can pause this video, play that, and then come back and and listen to the rest of the Bible study. So that sound like a plan? Okay, so you can pause the video right now, and you're back. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm it's trying to get the gears going, you know. So after the quiet worship, I like to do just a little pre-written prayer. So we're gonna do that. So, God, thank you for bringing us all here tonight. Please guide my tongue and heart during this teaching, and guide everyone during the discussion and prayer time. Help us to be a reflection of your light by enlightening us to your ways with love, patience, and curiosity. We love you, God. Help us to love each other like you love us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. So, a quick update. Mia's going to be a little bit out of commission for a little bit. I did hear from her. She's just sick. That's all that's going on. So YouTube uploads are probably going to be more on Friday, maybe later, just because Facebook is currently being really dumb about mobile uploads. I have to use a computer, and I don't get access to a computer until Friday. So that's why YouTube videos are on Friday now. So if you want to get that sooner, you can go to the Facebook group and and watch them there, where they will be there'll be a new video every Wednesday at 6 p.m. So do that. I'm also currently on antidepressants, and I have mixed feelings about that. But more on that during prayer time. For now, let's just jump into Genesis 23 of the Amplified Version. It starts out. Sarah lived 127 years. This was the length of the life of Sarah. Okay, so real quick, Sarah is apparently the only woman in the Bible whose age of death was recorded. On top of that, both Old and New Testament writers hold Sarah in high esteem, an example of a godly woman. I personally think that there's better examples of faithful women in the Bible. Everything I've heard of Sarah is at best murky, while while in foreign lands, she goes along with Abraham's half-truth that she's just his sister and not his wife. She convinced her husband to sleep with her maid, possibly against her will, and then was unnecessarily mean to said maid and the son that came from that, to the point of banishing them to the desert because their sons were going through a sibling rivalry. And she doubted God could get her pregnant in her old age in the first place. To be fair, it could be argued her doubt was reasonable and her maid was maybe not the nicest either. But regardless, I wouldn't exactly call these incidents like great feats of faith either. Sounds like a pretty average believer to me. Perhaps there's more context I'm missing, but I think Sarah's age is recorded more because she's a historical figure, and and the age kind of helps date the timeline a little bit. She is, after all, the mother of the Hebrew people, so people are going to respect and acknowledge that. I suppose it's more of a reflection on how we view the founders or people who were the first of something in probably higher regard than they deserve. Especially if you're a direct descendant of that person, you're not going to think too hard about their faults. Maybe also there's an argument to be made for holding up women who don't do much over women who do, in fact, do a lot, especially in a patriarchal society. But we're all just doing the best we can at the end of the day. It's just interesting how labels don't always line up with actions or evidence, I guess. Whether this is grace or arrogance depends on the viewer, I suppose. But anyways, I just meant for this to be a quick Sarah was the only woman whose death age was recorded type of thing, and it turned into a mini musing. So let's just move on now, shall we? The verse continues. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, south of the future Jerusalem, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So in the last chapter, Isaac is saved from death, but in this chapter, his mother isn't as lucky. I actually have a lot to say about this one sentence because it opens up the opportunity for me to talk about grief. It's noted that Abe did in fact give himself time to grieve. He didn't let the grief consume him, as we'll see. He was real sad, and then he moved on to the best of his abilities afterwards. But he did weep, and there is no shame in that. Grief is not shameful, or it's not a shameful or embarrassing thing, and nor should it be treated as such, especially by friends and family. Of course it's sad. If ever there was a time for crying and depression, it'd be after your loved one died. And we, as Christians, shouldn't shy away from people who are processing grief. I've mentioned before how my cousin is currently grieving for her husband, and I do try to check in every now and then and see how she's doing. Maybe not as often as I could or should, but such are human flaws. But it is, in fact, awkward for me, as I'm sure you could all understand. I'm just this 26-year-old nobody that's never had to deal with death on this scale, and my cousin is really more my mom's cousin, so she's at least a decade or two older than me. On top of the age gap, there is a bit of an emotional distance I've been trying to catch up on. My cousin and her husband used to actually live with our family during the divorce that my parents were going through. So I was pretty close to both of them when I was a child. But then everyone moved to different areas of the country, and we just kind of lost touch, especially because, it's more my parents' people than my people. But I actually saw both of them for the first time in a decade at a recent family reunion, and we reconnected and we exchanged contact info, and then a few months later her husband died. So normally I feel like I'm not really great at keeping in contact with people, talking just to talk with no real purpose. So emotional distances are common for me with long distance friends and family members, but I'm almost positive it was the spirit who compelled me to just text her and ask how she was holding up, and I've been doing check-ins every now and then since. And it's still awkward because we know each other, but we don't know each other, so I often don't know what to say or do, especially because she doesn't even live in the same state as me. But I have found that if I push past my own insecurities and just be with my cousin in this moment, I'm just honest and upfront, it can actually be quite a pleasant interaction in a bittersweet kind of way. It also helps that my cousin is also just really cool and easy person to talk to naturally. As far as I can tell, she's handling the death in a really healthy way. She's honest about when she's not feeling great about it, and she lets herself be sad about it. But she's also grateful for the time she got to spend with her husband, and she looks forward to reuniting with him after Judgment Day. I'm very impressed with her, honestly. She makes checking up on her very easy. So I definitely lucked out on the first person I've had to console in a real way, or like comfort, I guess. I assume it's not always easy for consolers, but whether it's rough or simple, it's never about us or trying to fix something. People in pain don't often need someone who can say the right thing. They just need someone who are going to stay at their side, present and empathetic to their pain, no matter what. As someone who has dealt with chronic loneliness all of my life, I can, at the very least, understand wanting someone, just anyone, to show through their actions that they are here for me and I am not alone. So if you know someone dealing with really any kind of pain at all, don't give like the lame excuse that, oh, you're just giving them space, letting them figure it out on their own and then trying to come back when they're over it. Ask them if that's what they need first. Don't assume. Just ask them what they need in general, really. And they might not know what they want. They might want nothing other than for you to treat them normally, like nothing happened. Just kind of not focusing so much on just not being weird about it. And, just maybe try to invite them to social activities when possible. It's different for everybody, so whatever it is, just do your best to just kind of listen to what it is, kind of follow your intuition maybe. And usually they do just want someone who will listen. And if they do want space, give them a week or two, then check back in. Make it clear to them that you are here for them. It will make their pain so much easier to deal with. Trust and believe. Imperfectly present is better than perfectly absent. That's just good friend energy. And for those cursed with only bad friends, and honestly, those with good friends too, as they're unlikely to comfort you completely, there's so many verses about how God is here for you, and He can give you that peace of mind that you're seeking. Just Google how God is enough for you. If you need proof, excuse me, you'll see that when you have no one else to talk to, if you're not getting that right kind of comfort that you need, God is always listening, and He will give you exactly what you need at that moment. And when you're dealing with people asking questions you don't know the answer to, let God answer for you. Just kind of follow your spiritual intuition on it. In all honesty, God shouldn't be there as a last resort. It's better to have an established relationship prior, but if you haven't yet, now's a good time to start. And any moment is a good time to start. And all you really gotta do is just say, hey God, and just keep talking. Don't censor yourself either. Be angry and yell, cry if you must, ask questions. Just let it all out. I strongly believe that you'll feel better if you do. Maybe not immediately, but if you have that faith that you are going to get a response, then you will get a response. In my experience, at least. Just be sure you keep up the contact when God pulls you out of whatever hole you're in. God was a good friend for you, so you should be a good friend back, and keep talking to Him no matter your circumstances, and just keep considering his wisdom and such. No one likes the friend that only pops up when they need something. As James 5:13 puts it, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. Pray without ceasing. And to be fair, it's easier said than done, but it can be done. Probably imperfectly, but that's okay. God doesn't want you to be perfect. He just wants to have a relationship with you. So don't stress about it too much. Just like a healthy amount of stress, maybe. But for the most part, don't stress about it too much. But all that to say, we shouldn't be ashamed of grief, nor should we fear it in others. Grief can actually be a beautiful and necessary thing if you let it. A commentator known as Boyce once said, to weep for a loved one shows we have been close, that the loss is keenly felt, that death is the enemy, and that sin has brought this sad punishment with us. I'd like to add the happy note that Jesus destroyed death thanks to his mercy, so all who put their hope in him can potentially see their loved ones again, assuming that they believe also. But what if they don't? Well, that is unfortunate, but it was their choice not to believe, and we have to respect this and accept it. Perhaps death is a way to give us that sense of urgency, to try to genuinely convert people so we can save them from true death. There's a bit of debate as to what hell actually is. There seems to be like a relatively 50-50 split among scholars between the classic eternal torture view and this newish thing known as annihilationism. With annihilationism, you aren't tortured for all eternity. You just cease to exist, as many atheists have described before. All who chose to turn their backs on God, including the demons, they will be purged from the conscious realm once and for all. And there's some decent textual support for both views, in all honesty, but I personally lean towards annihilationism just because I think the evidence is a little bit stronger. But I think as Christians, you kind of have to accept that both are a possibility, and either way, we'd rather our friends and family and neighbors not to have to experience either. Grief gives us a taste, I think, of the loss that we're going to feel on Judgment Day. And perhaps God will give us a chance for a final goodbye, the final closure for our loved ones before we never see them again. How sad that will be. But on the flip side, think of how joyous it would be if they got to stay with you in the new Eden forever. Like, what a relief, it's quite the carrot and the stick, But of course, you're not solely responsible for another person's faith. It's up to them at the end of the day, so don't get too crazy. But maybe if you show them that same quiet, messianic love that has saved so many others, if you could promote that godly kindness, and more importantly, if you do this by letting the Spirit work through you, maybe you and God could help give them more of a chance to make the right choice together. That is the general idea of the Great Commission, after all. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about that one sentence. Let us finally move on to the next verse. Jeez. Then Abraham stood up before his dead wife's body and spoke to the sons of Heth the Hittites, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner, a resident alien among you. Sell me property for a burial place among you, so that I may bury my dead in the proper manner. Okay, so most other translations don't actually mention Sarah's body, which begs the question: if he brought her body with him to this transaction, or if they like came to him, or if this is just like a weird translation, or like what. Sarah seems to have died close to where the Hittites were, but I imagine, like any neighborhood, there's still considerable walking distance to cover between one point and another. So it would make sense for Abraham to bring his wife so he could go straight to the gravesite without having to do a lot of back and forth. But it is weird that none of the other translations mention her body. The Amplified Version does have a tendency to include other potential translations of a word or phrase for like added context. So this could be just like an example of that. It's hard to say, but I suppose it doesn't really matter either way. Just something to consider. So let's move on to the next verse. So the Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen to us, my lord, you are a prince of God, a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave or hinder you from burying your dead wife." So Abraham stood up, bowed to the people of the land, the Hittites. And Abraham said to them, "If you are willing to grant my dead a proper burial, listen to me, and plead with Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, so that he may sell me the cave of the Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me here in your presence for the full price as a burial site, which I may keep forever among you." Okay, so it can be assumed that these Hittites likely heard about what happened to Abimelech. Maybe Abimelech was their king, I don't know, but they probably heard about what happened to Abimelech, so they knew Abraham wasn't anyone to fuck with. And perhaps there were other unrecorded events that further validated this vibe, as they do appear to live near Abraham's camp. I'm sure Abraham, being incredibly rich, also helped encourage them to show the reverence that they do, to the point that they actually offer him a free grave. Though it should be noted that the Hittites don't really offer Abraham a free grave just out of respect for him. It's actually more the cultural practices of the time actually expected the seller in situations like these to graciously offer their wares to free for the more esteemed buyers, the more special cases. And the buyer was expected to humbly refuse the offer and insist on paying. It gives both parties the opportunity to showcase their generosity and honor to the public. And purchases like these were generally happened at the city gate, also known as the town hall, where all of the city officials and other such citizens could act as witnesses. So this story doesn't seem to be an exception. So this was all like a big social show, which Abraham knew to expect. Abraham likely also picked this cave because it was close to the altar he built in Mamre, mentioned in Genesis 13. He likely thought this made it a good spot, close to God. And considering also that he likely wasn't planning on using the cave just for Sarah, usually when a surviving partner buys a burial site for a dead one, they're buying the one next to it so they can eventually be buried together. Hence why Abraham picked what was likely a decently roomy cave. And that ended up working out for both Isaac and Jacob, who were also buried there with their wives when they died. What's funny about the location, though, is that it's currently believed to be in Palestinian territory. Like, isn't that just the most hilarious thing you've ever heard? The three great patriarchs of Judaism are buried in the descendants of Ishmael's land, arguably the enemy of the Jews. Like, this is really the most dramatic sibling rivalry of all time. But moving on from that, Abraham, by the way, could have just rented a grave or simply buried her somewhere random or cremated her for a lot cheaper than just buying one outright. But again, the culture of the time had very specific burial practices. There was like a social tier of how you buried your dead, and it would have felt disrespectful to Abraham, a rich man chosen by God to bless the nations, if Sarah was in anything less than a privately owned grave. Something that could and would stay with the family no matter what. Interestingly, though, while the three patriarchs ended up buried in an owned grave, Jesus was actually buried in a rented/borrowed grave. Granted, he only needed it for 3 days anyways, but the people burying him didn't know that. Just makes you think, Abraham cares about burial placements, while God does not. God blessed Abraham with many riches, yet he still wanted the same status symbols as the rest of society. Whether this is right or wrong in this instance is up for debate, but I think it still tickles at the idea of what is enough when God gives you plenty. And we'll probably get more into that later, but for now, let's observe the details of how Abraham acquired the cave. I think you'll find it at least somewhat more interesting than what it appears. So the verse continues. Now Abraham was present there among the sons of Heth. So within the hearing of all the sons of Heth, and all who were entering the gate of his city, Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you this entire field, and I also give you the cave that's in it. In the presence of the men of my people, I give it to you. Bury your dead there. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. He said to Ephron, in the presence of all the people of the land, If you will only please listen to me and accept my offer, I will give you the price of the field. Accept it from me, and I will bury my dead there. Ephron replied to Abraham, My lord, listen to me. The land you seek is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead. So Abraham listened to Ephron and agreed to his terms, and he weighed out for Ephron the amount of silver which he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. Okay, so Ephron continues the dance of, no, take it for free. We're both super rich, so what's it really matter? And Abraham plays his part of like, no, I insist on paying as a courtesy. What's interesting about it, though, is Ephron offers the land the cave is on as part of the deal, as a show of how generous he is. The other interesting about it is that Abraham accepts the offer for the land, even though he could have just insisted on, like, no, just the cave. That's fine. That's all I need. This not only makes the price go up, of course, but it also means that Abraham now owns land within the Hittite region. By the laws of that time, that means Abraham is now a citizen among the Hittites and is therefore indebted to their king, either through taxes or military support. Maybe both. I don't know. This is likely why Ephron offered it in the first place. Abraham was pretty rich. He had lots of able-bodied servants and seemed to have a powerful God on his side, which are all valuable things to have as an ally. So I'm not entirely sure what position Ephron held, but getting Abraham to buy some of his land probably gave him some brownie points from the king for that reason. That much is obvious, but it's also interesting that Abraham accepted that offer, knowing it would indebt him to a pagan nation. Especially since God had already promised that his descendants would get all this land for free. Again, he could have said, no thank you, just the cave, please. And owning a grave isn't quite enough to be considered a land-owning citizen. So my guess is Abraham, after at least half a lifetime of just wandering around this promised land as a landless immigrant, like it's Is God saying it's his, but it's not his? Just relying solely on the kindness of his neighbors. He just wanted to know the feeling of owning land and belonging, especially after losing his wife. Commentators kind of dance around the implication of this, so I'm going to just say it. It seems to me like Abraham is trying to fulfill God's promise for him, or at the very least get something that isn't technically meant for him. God had said that the land was going to belong to his descendants free of charge. All Abraham needed was a cave, but now he's getting land too. Land in one of the many nations that will end up getting overthrown by his descendants. But like I said, neither writers nor commentators seem to mind this too much, at least currently. God doesn't say anything either. So most likely it's just like a little treat for Abraham, for a century of dedicated, albeit shaky servitude. And as a condolence for losing his wife, let him at least get a taste of what his descendants will experience before he dies, I still say, however, that you should be wary of this. Treats can be slippery slopes into 8-course meals if you're not careful. You think you've done enough for God and you just want like a little reward. You stop thinking about the kids he already gave you, the abundant wealth he already gave you, the general health and guidance he already gave you. You think God hasn't done anything for you, not enough anyways, so you treat your own self. And it feels good, so you maybe keep doing it with increasing frequency. Little things turn into big things, and suddenly you're relying more on what you can give yourself than what God can provide for you. Now, obviously, this is kind of an extreme example, and I'm not saying that you should never buy anything for yourself, but it's more just something to weigh in on when you're considering getting something kind of big. Just ask yourself, is God glorified and honored if I do this thing? His will over yours, as the saying goes. But as with Abraham, it appears God was indifferent. So Abe accepted the offer of the land, and we'll just have to wait and see how this affects future generations. And since Abraham did not refuse the bonus land and insisted on paying as is tradition, Ephron could now coyly and offhandedly mention that the cave with the land was 400 shekels, which is actually quite expensive apparently, but as he said, what's that between you and me? Just go and bury your dead. With true generosity, one wouldn't even mention the price. You wouldn't want to give them a ballpark of what to return when they get the chance. But these people weren't really trying to be genuinely generous. They were just trying to appear generous. And I'm not saying that as a fault necessarily. It can be like a little superficial, but it's really just how bargaining happened those days, and honestly, it's a vibe that is still prevalent in some Middle Eastern cultures today. God forbid you ever show true generosity to certain cultures over there. They will find some way to pay you back, even if it kills them, because the alternative is sitting with the uncomfortable feeling that you owe somebody something. And I'm thinking of a specific friend when I say this, Sandra. But you could look at it as a culture obsessed with returning the favor and balancing the books, which isn't actually really a bad thing. No one likes a person who never pays someone back or just tries to be as generous back to them as they are to them. Even in America, which is a lot more comfortable with giving people things without getting much back in return, it gets exhausting and frustrating after a bit if you're just constantly giving things to somebody and they're just never giving anything back. One-sided relationships are never fun. So, but on the flip side, if somebody is too generous and the person receiving could never pay them back, that could also add unnecessary stress, especially in a culture that expects you to pay them back. But, such are cultural norms. Sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. The important thing is to consider intent, practicality, and result. In this instance, Abraham was a wealthy man who could afford 400 shekels and wanted some land, and Ephron was a wealthy man who wouldn't mind losing some land for 400 shekels. Both walked away happy, so I don't sense malice in this exchange. Perhaps some intent to rope Abraham into a political alliance, but who wouldn't want God's chosen one on their team? Abraham knew what it all meant, and he clearly didn't care, or else he would have said something. So let's just drop all that and conclude with the final verse, which is... So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, also known as Hebron, the field and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, and in all of its borders around it, were deeded over legally to Abraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who were entering at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah to the east of Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave in it were deeded over to Abraham by the Hittites as a permanent possession and burial place. So you'll notice how the writers really emphasize that Abraham bought the land and how he held the deed for this land, which was now his. So clearly they want no dispute on this later. Israel has always had a bit of trouble holding on to their land. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Like I mentioned before, even now, this very cave is in a Palestinian territory. Not that it really matters now, not with the promise of the new Israel, the new Eden, that will be open to all who believe one of these days. But back then, it mattered, because that was the only promised land back then that they knew of. But going back to the overemphasizing of Abraham's land ownership, there's some debate as to whether Moses and his scribes wrote Genesis or if it was just some randos a few hundred years afterwards, possibly around the time of Solomon. Either way, there were often invaders that would try to claim the land as rightfully theirs for various reasons. So you can't help but imagine the writers as they wrote this passage thinking, see, it's written here. We bought it. It's our birthright. It belongs to us. Stop harassing us, because at least this section of land is definitely ours. It's just a funny thought to end on, And we are ending here, by the way. That's it. That's all the words. Feel free to leave any questions or observations in the comments section, but let's move on to the prayer requests for now. By the way, you can also let me know if you have any prayer requests. I don't mind adding you to the list. But, so we're still going to be praying for my cousin. I've been leaving a GoFundMe for her in the description. It's just to help her with the funeral costs, and she's going to be moving with some people who can help support her. So it's just kind of for covering that. So if you feel compelled, she's a very cool person and she deserves all the love. So if you feel like you can, then, drop a little bit of money in the GoFundMe. But we're going to be praying that, God keeps her strong. God keeps her head above the water. He, does the things for grieving stuff. We're also going to pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey from the Naked Bible podcast. Dr. Heiser, I believe, is currently going through chemo right now. Trey seems to be getting better from his COVID, but, it's long COVID is a thing. So we're going to just pray that they stay in good health. And as I said before, Mia is sick. That was why I haven't heard from her. Kind of silly. It's silly for me because I was taking her lack of response very personally, and I definitely shouldn't have. But we are gonna pray that she gets better because she is immunocompromised, and when she gets sick, she gets like really sick. So we're gonna pray that she gets through that. And on top of Mia being sick, a lot of my family members also have COVID now. My mom and like her little family unit that she's got, pretty much they all have COVID. I have a couple other family friends have COVID. One of my aunts got COVID. Although I did hear, last I heard, my aunt that has COVID, she did have to go to the hospital for it, but it sounds like they're going to be releasing her soon. So hopefully that means that she's all good now. So we're just going to pray for the health of everyone. And then for me and myself, like I said at the beginning, I started on antidepressants, mostly because it's mostly because I just feel like I don't have like the best temper or attitude, and I've been kind of pretending that it's fine, but I don't know, like the more I do therapy, like just talking it out, the more I'm kind of feeling like I'm hitting a plateau, and I just don't think I can progress in my mental health without taking some kind of medication. So that's kind of nerve-wracking because I've never fully, I don't know, like it's not that I don't trust medication, it's just that it's a process a lot of the times, and it's that has been confirmed. The antidepressants I've been given, they're not immediate, as with all antidepressants. There are side effects. I've been getting like dizzy and nauseous, and I think it's making me have insomnia, which is my least favorite thing. I love sleep. My least favorite thing is like just being awake in bed. So that's annoying. So I don't know. I guess pray for that. And I feel like there was, I don't know. Oh, I also got anxiety for no reason. I don't know why. My guess is that this whole like antidepressant and just like kind of coming to terms with like all of the things that I need to fix about myself. It's just stressful, I guess. And like not even just fixing, just like all of the changes that are happening. I think it's stressing me out a little bit. So I guess I'm just gonna pray for me staying sane. Yeah, okay, but yeah, that's basically the prayer request. So let's do the prayer thing now. God, hello. How are you? I'm okay, I guess. Doing a lot better than the last Bible study. So thank you for guiding me through that. I just want to. I don't like how I say just. Like, oh, I just have like this laundry list of people I want to pray for. But you know how it is. I would like to pray for my cousin who is grieving. And also having to deal with her son who is also grieving, and they're just like grieving together, and they're having to move all these stuff around. It's just all stress and stuff. So I just pray that you can help guide her through that whole process, help her to feel your presence as much as you can, and just like keep her from going completely insane. She seems like she's doing good, so thank you for the support you've given her so far. I just pray that continues. I'd also like to pray for the health of so many people. Pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey, that they both stay in good health relative to their conditions. Try to keep them alive, for they are very important, I think. I just want to keep any complications from coming up with them, and keep their spirits high too, because, dealing with health issues can be very demoralizing. So just kind of help them feel your support and guidance through that. Same goes for Mia and all of my friends and family who are pretty sick. Mia actually may also have COVID, but I'm not sure. But just pray that you also try to pull them out of that sickness. Thank you for my aunt, who you seem to already be doing that. I pray that you heal my GERD. I know it's not on you to heal the GERD. I just gotta stop eating crappy food. But, you know, I do what I can when I live in a van. But yeah, I just pray that, I just pray for the health and well-being of all of my friends and family who are struggling with the sickness that comes with winter, especially during a pandemic. So I just pray that you keep the hospitalizations to a minimum, keep the deaths to a minimum. All of these people who are sick are very important to me, so I would be very upset if they did die. Just throwing that out there. So I would prefer if they lived, and are able to continue living for at least a few more decades. I'd also like to pray for myself because I don't know, there's like a lot of changes on the horizon. There's a lot of things I gotta do, and it's just making me anxious. And there's just like health issues for myself. I don't think I have COVID, but I at the very least have to deal with the side effects of this new antidepressant thing that I'm doing, and all of these other such changes. Like I gotta be moving soon. Well, not soon, but in like, I think like 8 months, which is soon to me. That's a lot of time to be stressing about that. And there's just like all of these events and these like doctor stuff that I have to do, and it's sucking up so much time. So I just pray that a week where I don't have to do anything but work happens soon, because I don't like being busy. It's annoying. But yeah, just also, you know, keep my spirits up, help me support. Also, like, remind me to talk to you more, because I'm kind of bad about that, and I'm annoyed at how I'm bad about that. So just, I don't, like, I'm just not very good at remembering that I'm supposed to pray to you regularly. As stated previously, I'm supposed to pray ceaselessly, and I feel like I do okay, but I feel like I could do better. So you could just help me with that struggle. That would be cool. I would like to have a good, strong relationship with you, because that's kind of the point of being a Christian. So, but that's about it. I hope you're doing good up in heaven and like everywhere. And yeah, I just pray that you forgive us of any wrongdoing. Let us know if we don't know that we did something wrong, and help us to correct that. Help us to love people as much as you love us, and help us to love you as much as we're supposed to love as we tend to love other people. And yeah, just, I don't know, help us to what's the word? Rely on you, I think. Help us to be better about recognizing you and acknowledging you and considering your wisdom and all that fun stuff. And just, we anxiously await for Judgment Day, when everything's all good and worked out. But until then, you know, keep your hand on us best you can. And that's about all I got. Okay, well, amen. Thanks God, amen. What's after the prayer? So yeah, that's about it for the Bible study. I like to end on a loud worship song. For those watching on Facebook, just scroll up. For those on YouTube, go into the description and click on the link for the loud worship. Strongly encourage you to donate to my cousin's GoFundMe. It would help her out, and I'm sure she'd appreciate it. But yeah, go to loud worship. Listen to loud worship, and loud worship is fun. That's the one where it's not like a reflective thing. It's more of a let's dance. You know, get that adrenaline pumping. All right. So listen to that song, and then go away after that, and continue to be Christiany people, and I will hopefully see you guys in like 2 weeks. I feel like I'm forgetting to say something. Nah, it's probably whatever. Alright, well, see you guys later. Okay, bye.